For 10 years, he never missed a Sunday visit. He had no idea she was leaving him something that would break him before it healed him. Jacob knocked twice, like always, before stepping inside. The old screen door squeaked, and the smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around him like it always did. Miss Evelyn sat by the window with her knitting, wearing the same rose-patterned sweater she claimed made her look awake. She looked up and smiled like she'd been waiting all week just for him. "You're 5 minutes late," she teased. Jacob grinned and kissed her cheek. "Traffic's a mess when the church crowd hits the diner." She chuckled. "Good excuse. I'll allow it." Every Sunday, like clockwork, for 10 years straight. Ever since he'd aged out of foster care at 18, Jacob came back to visit the woman who never let him feel unwanted, even when the world did. She didn't have much, never did. Lived in the same creaky old house with mismatched furniture and plastic flowers in the window. But to Jacob, it was the only real home he'd ever known. They talked about everything and nothing. Politics, old movies, the neighbor's cats. She always made too much food. He always took the leftovers. And when it was time to leave, she'd hug him tight, whispering, "You're my best decision, baby." Then one Sunday, everything changed. She didn't answer the door. Jacob found her on the couch, peaceful, arms crossed, like she had just drifted off in the middle of one of her crime shows. The blanket she always wrapped around herself had slipped to the floor. He called her name once, twice, then just stood there. The silence in that house was louder than anything he'd ever heard. What followed was a blur. Ambulance lights, neighbors showing up with pies and tissues, and a funeral filled with faces Jacob didn't know, saying things about Evelyn that didn't touch the heart of who she really was. But the real shock came 2 weeks later, when a lawyer called and asked Jacob to meet. "Miss Evelyn left something for you," he said. Jacob blinked. What could she possibly have left? The man just said, "You'll want to sit down for this." Jacob sat stiffly across from the lawyer, hands clenched, unsure if this was a mistake. Evelyn had lived simply, wore second-hand clothes, clipped coupons, and always reused wrapping paper. She didn't have anything to leave. The lawyer opened a thin folder and slid over an envelope with Jacob's name written in Evelyn's familiar, shaky handwriting. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "Jacob, I know you're probably shaking your head right now saying I didn't have anything worth giving, but I've had a plan for years. Just never told you, because I didn't want you to feel pressure or think you owed me anything. Remember the house on Walnut Street? The one I used to clean every Tuesday? I bought it in '92, little by little, with every saved dime. It's not big, it's not pretty, but it's yours now. Paid off, taxes covered for 5 years. I left the title with the lawyer. There's more, though. Look under the floorboard in your old room, 3rd plank from the window. You always said you never had a place of your own. Well, now you do. Love you always, Mama E." Jacob's chest tightened. "She owned a house?" he asked, stunned. The lawyer nodded. "And left it entirely to you?" He didn't know what to say. He barely remembered the place, some small rental he'd helped her clean years ago. He thought she was just the housekeeper, but she'd owned it, quietly, carefully, and never said a word. An hour later, Jacob was standing outside that house on Walnut Street. The paint was peeling, the steps creaked, and weeds had claimed half the yard. But it was real, and it was his. Inside, dust covered the counters. Cobwebs clung to the corners. But when he stepped into what had once been his childhood room, his knees buckled. Under that floorboard was a box. Inside, old photos of the two of them, birthday cards he forgot she'd saved, a drawing he made when he was 7 that said, "You're my real mom." But there was something else. A savings account book. It had his name on it. And the balance? $187,350. His mouth went dry. She had been saving for him. Every penny she could. Birthday money she never spent. The cleaning jobs. The yard sales. Quiet sacrifices she never once mentioned. Not even when he offered to help her with bills. Jacob sat on the dusty floor, surrounded by memories. Stunned, silent. She hadn't just left him a house. She had left him a life. Jacob stayed on that floor for what felt like hours. He kept going through the box like maybe something would explain it better. Why she never told him. Why she chose to live so small when she'd been building something so big for him. There were grocery receipts bundled with rubber bands. A tiny notebook filled with scribbled notes. Every dollar she'd saved, every item she went without. One line stood out. Skipped new coat. Jacob needs boots. He pressed his hand to his mouth, breath catching. All the times he'd asked if she needed anything. All the times she smiled and said, "I've got everything I need." He thought she meant old lady things. Tea, crosswords, maybe her knitting. But now he knew. He was everything she needed. The next day, Jacob called off work and brought cleaning supplies to the house. He scrubbed every corner, fixed what he could, patched the windows. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was her last word. Her way of saying, "You were always worth it." That weekend, he invited 2 kids from a nearby shelter to come help him plant flowers out front. They didn't ask why. They just liked the cookies he brought and the radio playing old Motown. But when one of them asked, "Is this your house?" Jacob smiled for the first time in days and said, "No, it's ours." He used part of the savings to renovate the house, and the rest to start a small foundation in Evelyn's name. It helped foster kids transition out of care. First aid kits, cooking classes, housing help, someone to call on Sundays. Everything he wished he had when he first aged out. Everything she had quietly given him. Months later, on what would have been her birthday, Jacob stood by the freshly painted porch and watched as 3 teens moved into the house. One of them asked, "Who was she?" He smiled gently. She was someone who made everything out of nothing, and gave it all away without ever saying a word. That night, he sat in her old rocking chair by the window, holding the last birthday card she ever gave him. "I didn't give you life, baby, but loving you gave me mine." Tears ran down Jacob's cheeks, but he wasn't crushed anymore. He was carried. A few weeks later, Jacob got a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, no return address, just a name at the bottom he hadn't heard in over 15 years. Cheryl. His birth mother. He stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Dear Jacob, I heard about Miss Evelyn's passing through someone at the agency. I know I have no right to reach out, not after all these years. But I wanted to say thank you for being there for her. I saw a photo of the house you're fixing up. It's beautiful. She would have been so proud. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to tell you I'm clean now. I've been sober 5 years. I live in a group home for women in recovery. And I've been praying you had someone in your life who loved you when I couldn't. Looks like you did. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No pressure? Cheryl." Jacob folded the letter slowly, hands trembling. The emotions swirled. Anger, confusion, sadness. But underneath all of it, there was something Evelyn had taught him to carry. Grace. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he walked to the community room in the house where 3 teens were playing cards and eating cheap pizza. One of them asked, "Who's that?" Jacob smiled faintly. Just someone from the past. He didn't know yet if he'd write Cheryl back. He needed time. But he knew one thing for sure. Evelyn had changed the way he saw people. Not just with her love, but with her patience. her quiet belief that even broken things could grow again. Weeks turned into months, and the Evelyn Grace Project grew. Volunteers came, donations followed, and Jacob, once a forgotten foster kid, was now a home builder, a mentor, a son who kept his mother's name alive, not with monuments, but with kindness. Every Sunday he still visited her, not at the old house, at the hilltop cemetery with the wind blowing gently through tall grass. He'd sit beside her grave with a cup of coffee and talk about everything. The new kids, the broken sink, the grant he just won. And when he stood to leave, he'd whisper what he always used to hear from her. "You're my best decision." Because he finally understood. He wasn't just her second chance. She had been his first miracle.